Hi guys and welcome to History Infection. This time we're talking about smallpox. Smallpox probably gets its name to differentiate itself from the Great Pox, which is our old friend syphilis. Like the last proper episode of A History Infection, smallpox played a big role in another American president's life. Good old boy George Washington. Smallpox was possibly one of the most deadliest common diseases prior to the discovery of the effective vaccine of human history. Just how deadly was smallpox? Well, in the 18th century it's estimated that it killed nearly 500,000 people a year throughout Europe each year throughout the 18th century. If you got smallpox, you had around about a 30 to 40% chance of dying from the infection, and if you didn't die, you were normally left scarred, horrifically scarred, for the rest of your life. These scars are far worse than the pox left by things like chickenpox. The single greatest deaths caused by smallpox was probably the deaths it caused in the New World. Smallpox caused death in untold amounts throughout the New World, as there'd been enough time for the divergence of the circulating smallpox virus that it meant the native populations of both the North and the South of America had little or no natural immunity to the virus. This fact of course opened the way for the invading Spaniards. Warfare and smallpox have had a long and sordid history. A young George Washington is visiting a family friend's estate in the Barbados. George and his brother are a bit reluctant to visit as smallpox is currently on the island. Unfortunately, George contracted smallpox and was gravely ill but managed to pull through. Later during the Revolution, George Washington was faced with a difficult decision. The British were far more resistant to smallpox, and with the looming outbreak possibly seeded by the British troops, he had to decide whether or not to get his troops inoculated for smallpox. George actually did manage to get the majority of his troops inoculated without the British finding out and using it to their advantage. There are several different methods for smallpox control. Isolation of the patients, inoculations, or vaccinations. Inoculation used pus or scabs of smallpox-infected people to immunize healthy people against the disease. Vaccination normally used an animal pathogen, cowpox, to infect the person and allow their immune system to develop the same resistance. Inoculation, sometimes known as virilation, was a practice that had its origins around the 8th century. It gained Western appreciation when a Lady Mary Wortley Montagu had her daughter virilated in Constantinople, which is now Istanbul, not Constantinople. Lady Mary herself had smallpox at the age of 26 and left her scarred and disfigured and also without eyelashes, as one account puts it. Vaccination was discovered by Jenner in 1796. It had been observed anecdotally that milkmaids often had very fair skin, or at least they very rarely seemed to have any of the classic pock marks left by smallpox. It was suggested that this was due to them somehow encountering the disease very often. As they worked very closely with cows who have a similar disease known as cowpox, Jenner decided to use the cowpox virus to vaccinate people. His first vaccination of a person was of James Phillips, who he inoculated from pus from a milkmaid named Sarah Nelms, who herself had contracted cowpox. Jenner also incidentally showed that cowpox wasn't very well defined, and the name actually applied to a number of different diseases which had caused some confusion to Jenner and his research. After the success of his trial, he tried to publish the results with the Royal Society, but they had this to say to him: ought not risk his reputation by presenting to the learned body anything which appeared so much at variance with the established knowledge and withal so incredible. A quick note that the vaccine, unlike virilation, did not give lifelong immunity, but it did produce far less side effects. Giving someone the virilation was effectively inoculating them with smallpox. And of course this was quite difficult to control. You're effectively giving someone a pathogen in hopes that they can overcome it, but in some cases people couldn't and did die of virilation. So vaccination was a preferable alternative as it was much less risky. Smallpox was now easily controllable, and by the 1930s it was eradicated from the UK and the USA, and by 1966 the World Health Organization decided that they would undertake the very ambitious task: the eradication of smallpox worldwide. Few people actually thought this would work, and it only just passed the voting stage with the World Health Organization, but luckily people had enough faith to at least try. So region by region, smallpox was pushed back by vaccination until the 1970s, when the World Health Organization started advertising for active cases of the virus and offering a cash reward for anyone confirming a person-to-person case. The World Health Organization proclaimed the world was smallpox-free in 1979. After much searching for any remaining cases, the last reported death from smallpox was actually a mistake. A photographer working in a lab below a smallpox lab in Birmingham managed to contract it somehow, probably by the virus passing through the vents. She contracted the virus and actually passed it on to her mother. She unfortunately died from the infection, but her mother survived. The director of the lab, due to the scandal, actually committed suicide when the lab was under quarantine. Currently, only 2 places worldwide are meant to still have the virus stored in a very secure facility. Although as someone who works in a lab, I wouldn't be very surprised if a hidden or lost in a freezer somewhere is a vial of the virus. just due to someone's mistaken, forgetful nature of people, which scientists are. There are arguments being made about maintaining these stocks as deterrents to smallpox being used as a biological weapon. That might sound a bit silly, as if we get rid of the stocks then surely smallpox can't be used as a biological weapon, but as I just said, there might be other vials of this virus still hanging around, and permafrost victims could still be used as a means of sourcing the virus. If someone was dedicated enough to go looking for it, I'm sure they could find the smallpox virus. We also now live in an era where we know the smallpox genome, and it's not particularly difficult to actually print off a copy of the genome, or particularly expensive. So by maintaining our stocks of smallpox, one, we can still study it and see how it responds, and two, we could easily produce a vaccine from it again. So the idea of maintaining the stocks of smallpox is still an open question. I don't think we really have to, and I'd prefer to live in a world where we didn't. I think smallpox is one of these great cases of human endeavour where we actually have decided we are going to eradicate a disease. And unlike polio, we haven't yet faltered. The World Health Organization actually set the millennium as the target date for the eradication of polio. However, unlike polio, smallpox was actually fully eradicated, and we live in a better and happier world thanks to that. And when people say that, vaccines are dangerous and they don't work, I can't believe that they don't seem to consider the fact that we now live in a world where smallpox is completely eradicated due to vaccinations and due to the careful work of scientists and policymakers for once. So that's a short history of smallpox. As always, I hope you've enjoyed it. Feel free to hit subscribe and like if you feel so inclined. I hope you'll join me next time. I'll be looking at a short history of the flu, the real flu, not man flu. Thanks for watching.